สวัสดีค่ะ Welcome to be my guest and you're with me สดชื่นลิมเกรียงไกร In today's episode we will be looking at how Thailand is doing in the International Institute for Management Development or IMD Competitiveness Yearbook. Also in their newest report, which is focusing on countries' digital competitiveness. So let's hear more about it with our special guest today.In today's episode, we are joined by Dr. Christos Kabolis, Chief Economist of IMD World Competitiveness Center. สวัสดีค่ะ
Hi Sarah.
Welcome to the program.
Thank
well,
you.
first of all, let me ask you about Thailand's ranking in this year's in your yearbook. It has moved up to
It
the
has indeed.
27th ranking. So, what do you think is the reason why Thailand managed to push itself up to this ranking?This year.
Let's start by saying a little bit what exactly it means to have a competition, competitiveness economy, and what it is depend upon. So, at the World Competitiveness Center at IMD, the way that we define competitiveness is the ability of a country to manage its resources and its competencies.In order to create an environment within which firms, the private sector, can generate long-term value creation.
Okay.
And in order to find the actual number, the ranking, what we do is we get together about more than 260 criteria that try to evaluate different aspects of the economy.And we group these criteria, and in the end of the day, we have four factors. These are the four pillars of competitiveness. So it is the infrastructure of the country, the government efficiency, the business efficiency, and the economic performance of the country that is generated in the end. And out of these four factors, we get the final number, which this year for Thailand is 27.
I see.
So,There are many, as you can imagine, all these criteria fluctuate. Some of them go up, some of them go down. So if we look these numbers, we will see that essentially government efficiency has improved, and also the economic performance has improved. The economic performance has improved because we have an increase in international trade.And this, I think, in general, boosted up the number for Thailand.
I see. So, 5 years ago, Thailand was also in this ranking, and then it dropped down, and then it came back up again. So, what do you think are the reasons that Thailand managed to come up back to this position again?
This is let's take a step back and try to see this question for your audience as well, to put things in perspective. So as you said, 5 years ago, Thailand was also in position 27. And most of the times what happens in countries is that they fluctuate. And the reason for that is twofold. On the one hand, maybe the country does something good and the country improves its position.On the other hand, because in the end of the day, these numbers try to compare one economy with the other 62 economies that we study. Maybe a particular economy has done nothing, but other economies have improved. So the numbers have been better for the other economies, and that's why a particular economy fluctuates.
I see.
I would think that the most important aspect here for Thailand is that for a number of years,Thailand succeeds in remaining in exactly the same group of ranking. So anywhere between 27 and 30.
So it's just a small amount of...
It's small amount. So, and probably we will discuss about that later on, Sarah, but in the long run, I think what Thailand needs to do is actually to take this particular trend and move it up. So instead of discussing about Thailand being between 27 and 30, we can discuss about Thailand being between 20 and 24 and fluctuates like that.
I see. So in other words, you're saying that Thailand actually maybe didn't move up and down, but it's the countries around it that maybe they did something more and they just moved up. But Thailand didn't fluctuate as much.
It did not fluctuate as much, but let's stress the fact that Thailand improves because the final number comes out of many different variables, as we said.
Yeah.
But what we see is that in many of these numbers, we see an improvement. So government efficiency has increased by 3 positions. So last year was, I don't remember, 23. This year is 20, the government efficiency. So it went up 3 spots.
Okay.
And this has affected the total ranking to be higher by 1 point. The economic performance also went up by 3 positions. It was 13 and now is 10.
Okay.
So if you think about the economic performance of the country, it is within the first 10 economies out of 63. This is very substantial.
Yeah, it's quite a good ranking after all.
Absolutely.
Compared to other countries as well. So when you talk about Thailand, maybe if you compare it to other countries in Europe, it wouldn't be fair enough because their system is different and their economy is quite different. So if let's say we compare it to countries in ASEAN like Singapore or like Malaysia, how do you think Thailand is doing in this region?
In the morning we were in the very nice conference that the Thailand Management Association arranges every year, and His Excellency the Minister of Finance actually explained that Thailand is moving from a low income economy to a medium income economy.
Okay.
So there are different ways that we can compare Thailand. You said before very correctly that maybe we cannot compare it with European countries because there is a difference, many differences with respect to culture.
Yeah.
But also maybe a little bit, it may not be a fair comparison to go directly Thailand vis-a-vis Singapore. I think that there are aspects where Thailand performs much better than the surrounding economies.
Okay.
For instance, the 3G and 4G broadband capacity of the country is much better than all the surrounding economies.
I see.
And there are other areas where Thailand can improve upon substantially.
I see. Well, let's take a short break and when we come back we'll talk more about it.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Welcome back to the program. So now we entered our second break. So let me ask you about a separate report that this year your organization has issued. As last year, I think it was embedded into the same report, but this year you decided to make a separate one about digital competitiveness in each country. So can you tell us a little bit why you decide to, have a separate report on this topic?
There are 2 main reasons.
Okay.
The one was a study that we did a few years back related to businesses, and in particular businesses in Switzerland.
Okay.
And we were trying to find out, given the major importance that we have with respect to sustainability, we were trying to find out whether there are any dimensions that long-term success in businesses can be actually captured by some of the actions that they undertake. And we found out that there are 3 very important variables to all the quote-unquote successful for the long-term businesses in Switzerland. And these 3 factors are governance, how these companies are governed, namely transparency and accountability, Sarah. The second is talent, the way that they develop and treat their working force. And the third one is innovation. So 4 years ago, we produced another ranking and was trying to identify what was going on with the talent, how the different economies develop and appeal to the international talent.
Yeah.
And was another component over there, innovation, that was very important. So last year we had this in mind for quite some time, and we wanted to see whether we can capture the capacity of an economy to really be able to cope with all the transformation that takes place in the recent years from the rapid change of technology.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And this was why we created this new ranking, the Digital Competitiveness Ranking.
I see. So is this like a long-term plan that every year your organization will produce this report?
Indeed, yes.
I see. So in the rankings, how is Thailand doing in this ranking?
Well, in this particular ranking, Thailand has a lower position compared to the competitiveness one. So we're speaking before about the 27th position.
Yeah.
Here actually Thailand is 41 out of the 63 economies.
Okay.
What we try to capture here is we try to capture three things. We try to capture knowledge. Essentially, remember, the Digital Competitiveness Ranking tries to find whether a particular economy can adapt and actually process and promote the digital technology in order to be able to be sustainable, a successful economy. And there are three factors that affect this capacity. The one is knowledge, whether the economy can actually understand the underlying issues of technology and can actually make it its own and start employing it in its own interests. Then is the technology framework. And finally, it is what we call future readiness, which is a very important factor and essentially tries to capture how prepared a particular economy is to deal with this transformation that takes place and affects the social, business, government, and social aspects of citizens of an economy.
I see. So as you've mentioned earlier that Thailand is not doing so well in this ranking. So what do you suggest that Thailand could do to improve in this ranking, in this report?
One of the important elements that we try to capture in the readiness component is how flexible and how adaptive the economy is. And over there we have three sub-factors, three areas that we try to understand what's going on with the economy. One of them has to do with the agility, the adaptability of individuals.
I see.
The other one has to do with the agility of the businesses. And the third sub-factor has to do with the capacity of the economy to integrate IT capabilities in its doings.
I see.
A very interesting thing that we found is that business agility is at a much better ranking, it's much higher than individual.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Surprising.
It is a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
One would have thought that maybe individuals are much more keen to adapt to different. So, by the way, it is surprising, but Thailand is not the only country that experiences this. For instance, Switzerland, where IMD is stationed in Lausanne, Switzerland has exactly the same difference.
I see.
Individuals adapt technologies less fast than businesses do.
Does this relate to the aging population in that country as well? Because as each country has more age, the age population is more, they are less keen to learn new technology. So if the young population in that country is lesser, it would equals to lesser engagement in individual. Does that has any relation?
It may be one of the factors. We take that into consideration. It may be one of the factors. The other thing is the general culture, or whether things can be done in a particular way through technology, or it's a little bit more difficult to do so.
I see. like environment overall, basically.
Correct.
I see. So what about in the region? How is Asia doing in this
So you
ranking?
have certain economies that perform superbly, like Singapore is number one, right, in this
Yes.
particular ranking, and you have other economies that do a little bit worse. I think, and one of the things that this is one of the issues that we're trying to bring in the conversation that we had earlier. I think that Thailand has to decide upon its own strategy. What are the things that needs to push forward? And adapting to digitization, the digital economy nowadays, it is not something that a country has a choice whether to do or not. It has to do it.
Compulsory.
Exactly. And it has to find the best way, given its own objectives, given its own strategy, to incorporate this aspect.
I see. Well, now we have to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more. Welcome back. So we're in our last break, and we will go back talking about the Competitiveness Yearbook, the report in that, the rankings there. Since Thailand is, around 27 to the 30th ranking, as you've mentioned earlier, is it possible that Thailand could move into, let's say, the upper 20s, in your opinion?
Indeed. And as a matter of fact, I think has already taken steps towards that direction. I am aware of the Thailand 4.0 program, for instance, and the agenda there that tries precisely to do something like that. One way that we can approach this question, and definitely it's not the only way, but one way that we can do is where in our ranking, in the factors that we were discussing before, there is room for improvement. That is where in our ranking Thailand performs not as great, weak. And we will see actually that the majority of criteria that Thailand performs weakly is in the infrastructure segment.
Okay.
So improving infrastructure will be definitely a force to push the ranking higher.
But isn't that a long-term approach?
This has these challenges. You're absolutely right. So in very general, there are two challenges with infrastructure.
Okay.
The one is that most of the times you have a major investment that needs to be undertaken.
Okay.
And the investment needs to be taken now. And the investment needs to be continuous. So there must be a commitment of the country and the government to continue a particular investment for many years.
I see.
The second is exactly what you said. The fact that the return of this investment is materialized most frequently in the long run.
I see.
Let's take as an example one aspect of infrastructure that Thailand needs to improve upon.
Okay.
Education. So if we think about education,
Yes.
any kind of a reform that is instituted and it is launched now in the elementary school, let's say, the return of this investment will come after 15 years,
It takes
20
time.
Takes time.
Yes.
So this is indeed a challenge, but it's something that I believe very strongly the Thai economy needs to undertake.
But when you say that it's a long-term approach, let's say it's education reform, you cannot guarantee the result, that it would actually work out the way that it would improve the economy. As you know, it might not work because government changes and ministers changes, policy changes. So in that perspective, in that kind of situation, what do you suggest that we could do to focus on reforming, or how we can maintain this education reform?
It will be nice if the education affects other aspects as well. We were discussing before the break, for instance, that an observation that we had about the Thai economy is that businesses are much more agile with new technology compared to the individuals. One way that you can address this issue is by education. So education is not going only to affect one thing positively, the actual segment of education, but it also going to affect other aspects of the economy. For instance, the individual agility with respect to technology.
I see. I see. So other than education, which is the other areas that Thailand should, focus on?
At IMD, when we try to measure infrastructure, we try to include components in addition to the traditional aspects like streets, transportation, freeways, that I know that Thailand has done a lot of work in the recent years.
And we have future plans as well.
Of course, and you have future plans indeed.
Yeah.
So in addition to that part of the infrastructure, we also include some other parts like the scientific and the technological infrastructure, which are very important for the digital element. We include education, and we also include health and environment.
Okay.
Because after all, competitiveness results hopefully in the increase of the prosperity of the people of a country.
Yeah.
And health is a very important component. So there are several aspects in infrastructure that need to improve upon. Thailand has a low ranking in education, has also a low ranking in health and environmental infrastructure as well.
I see. So we need to improve on this aspect.
I believe so.
I see. So what are we high on? Which aspects are we, which factors which we are doing well in the ranking?
You're doing very well in aspects related to the business efficiency. For instance, I was presenting earlier results about management practices. Most of the times when we're thinking about an economy, we're bringing in the governmental efficiency, and we always think about leaders in the public domain. But it is very, very important to have leaders in the private domain as well. Business that flourish rely heavily on the leadership qualities of the management team.
Yeah.
And what I presented earlier was the management practices. Something that was very interesting was that these management practices have increased since last year. We were speaking before about changes in position, right?
Yeah.
Has increased by 6 places.
That's quite a lot.
It is quite a lot. It is quite a lot. So this is an aspect that actually Thailand is moving towards the right direction.
I see.
There are also areas that Thailand is doing superbly. The international trade component is very, very strong.
Yeah.
And also the employment is very strong. Let me put it differently, the unemployment rate in Thailand is very, very low, which is something very good for the economy.
I see. Well, that's great. That's great to hear, actually.
Absolutely.
And what about in terms of competitiveness? How is Thailand doing in the region?
It's doing quite well, as a matter of fact, and is as we said before, that it really depends which components of the region you will undertake, which countries, but nevertheless is doing very, very well, and it is about in the same position, in the middle of the pack as well.
I see. So, as we cannot really compare Thailand to Singapore, Singapore had time to develop, and it has a very strong political system and very stable. And Thailand had its problems, had its phases, and now Thailand's more stable. But if we have to, face things that happened before, how can we, remain competitive despite political crisis or other, factors?
It's a difficult question, and it's a lot of time to discuss. But in addition to some of the things that we discussed, I think that every time that we want to improve upon, the most important aspect is a realization on our part that this is a strategy that we want to follow.
I see.
And what we can see in the Thai economy is that the government, the different institutions like TMA, individual companies really strive to think about ways to improve the competitiveness. And I think this is very, very important. Just the fact that we're sitting here and we're discussing and your audience listens these things, it's very, very important. So the first component that an economy needs to do, which is the realization and the seeking for improvement, Thailand is doing very, very well. And then there are the areas that we discussed before, mainly infrastructure.
I see. So we have to improve in some areas in order to move up.
Of
but at
course.
least we're now in a good position, and hopefully we will finally climb our way up into a higher ranking. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
ขอบคุณค่ะ According to the International Institute of Management Development, or IMD, Thailand has been ranked the world's 27th most competitive nation, and up from last year, which is on the 28th. And with its contribution that the country will have its economic stability and spending in the government and also the private sector establishing the Eastern Economic Corridor, or EEC, Thailand's ranking will definitely improve. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. See you again next time. สวัสดีค่ะ